And we are now live on YouTube with the January 16th, 2019 meeting of the Node.js modules team. We're joined right now by 9 people, one off from having quorum. So if anyone else joins here at the meeting, I'll make mention of that. But I don't believe we have anything that needs to land today or requires quorum, so it shouldn't be an issue. We have a full agenda for today. And we're going to start with some updates. Salah, do you have updates on the Breakout Teams project board or organizing work?
Well, I guess no updates. Last time I checked, it's just at a point where really we start interacting with it. So I guess it's ready to be used. I just don't know how we want to go about including it in what we do.
So how would you imagine it would be included?
Well, I think that every team has a card in their column. And basically, if that card is a reflection of, the glimpse of what you need to know about current activities within that team, it would be an effective way for those who are trying to catch up to get caught up quickly if they're going to get involved in one of those activities, basically. We talked about automating, and I'll leave that up to the rest of the group. Anybody who comes up, with an idea that everybody else wants, I guess it's organic, right? So whatever works for the majority at that point.
So, I think my gut on it, you could, I think you need to most likely take the action item of bringing it to these groups and onboarding them with how to use it, since using something like this is requesting and requiring extra work from people. You're either going to need to get, buy-in from those people that they want to do the work, or alternatively likely, do the work yourself. So I think that the next phase is just kind of getting buy-ins from these groups that this process is what they're going to follow.
Yeah. So, I mean, the board was in response really to, I guess, a couple of weeks back, no, I guess a couple of months now. Basically, there was a disconnect when people were trying to, I guess, catch up with what was going on with a particular thing, and I think that was dynamic modules at that point. Because the problem was it was hard to follow all the threads. So, the initiative of starting this board was in response to that during the meeting, where it was suggested that we could maybe look into that direction. So, I mean, it's really, if the group feels that this will help the activity, I think we should all, do what we can. I'm not bringing this idea onto the group or anything. I'm trying to just find a way to, get started. But if the group in general does not feel that this kind of organization is warranted, I think we should decide as a group that we don't want to go on with the board.
Okay. So we're up to the time on this. Salah, I'd advise it as like a follow-up to this. If we have, a process that's in place right there, I think we need to document how that process should be used and add that to our governance documentation, and then have a vote if we want to implement that as governance. Because I think if it's not explicitly something that we need to do as a project, or it's not documented, my gut is that people won't do it. The next thing that we're on, and for those following along, we have 10 people on now, so we actually have enough for quorum, because we have a PR against modules is number 242, and it's updating the stage 2 regarding dynamic modules. So it now reads, implement specific changes related to dynamic module records. It references the proposal, which is github.com/node.js/dynamic modules. And it adds a note saying we'll need to reach consensus on appropriate behavior for export star from dynamic module. If consensus cannot be reached, then this feature will be deferred to a later phase. The current behavior of throwing may also be reverted at a later time. Does anyone have any issues with the text as it's currently written? Okay, great. I think we can move forward and just land that. Just one more quick request. If anyone on the call is able to help with the notes, please do, because it's not possible for me to do all these things at once.
I can take over.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So that doc update has now landed. The next thing we have on the discussion is number 247. That's the Mode ESM proposal. This is Guy Bedford's proposal.
Can we group this with the demo and the other proposals, or was the discussion at the beginning to move dynamic modules to the end?
Whatever we prefer. Gus, what was the one that you needed us to get to first?
That was this one.
The Mode ESM one?
Yeah.
Then could we defer dynamic modules to the end rather, and start with the demo on that if we can? I just need to check that I can screen share because I'm running on Ubuntu here. So
yeah. So
sure.
Let's go in. We have right now we have another 47 minutes. So we have a bit of time. So, let's hop into the demo and run through. Let's just say you have 7 minutes to do the demo.
Sure. Can everyone see that on the screen?
Yep.
Great. Right. So this is a build. Basically, we've had at the moment, we started off with the minimal implementation. Sorry, this camera is terrible. As I type, it's right next to where my fingers are. So apologies. We started off with the minimal implementation. We then built out of that the import file specify resolution proposal, the exports proposal, and what I'm bringing to the group today, the Mode ESM proposal. And these are kind of, in a lot of ways, quite orthogonal proposals that kind of fit together. And then there's various edge cases that need to be worked out where they interact. What this is it's basically a demo of all of them running together. And the way that they run together is just what seemed sensible. The details aren't set in stone. It's just kind of an illustrative demo to show the sort of stuff that we're working on with these specs and to kind of just bring some clarity to that in terms of just seeing what it's doing for a normal user writing a Node.js app with these specs. So I'll start off with the basics of the file resolution specify proposals. So you'll notice I don't have any package.json here. I don't have any package.json in any of the folders down into the project. And I'm running this node with modules. So the first step, as in line with our minimal implementation, is that we're supporting MJS. So if I export something in MJS, I really hope you're not getting keyboard sounds there as well. I can then run that just directly with the node entry point. At the same time, I can write a JS file, and I can have module.exports equals common.js. And I can also run that with the Node.js entry point. So this now is the import file specify resolution proposal in terms of how we're distinguishing between JS and MJS and which is running which. We can also import that common.js from the local common.js file. And we can log it. What did I do wrong there? From. Oh, I called it x.js, sorry. There's this weird thing with the error messages where they're getting curly brackets around them when they're coming from C++. I have no idea why, but ideally we should fix that. So we can get both running together. We're using the default because we don't have dynamic modules. And so that's kind of the combined way of working with these things. The next step that you might want to do is see what happens when you're loading a package. So say, for example, we have node modules package, this is called, and I'm going to just move those files into node modules package. And then I want to have like an app.mjs that's going to say import package, for example. And I'm going to go directly into package and load the x.js that we created first. So if I run app, I'm loading package from my node modules, and I'm loading that x.mjs file, which was a module. I can also go in and pick out the y.js file, which was a common.js module. And that also works. And just to check it, I can do an import star as m. So you can see that we're loading both. It's worth noting here that these have to be exact specifiers in line with what we've specified so far in the minimal repo. So if I left out the .js there, I'd get a not found error. And this is for any package, CommonJS, ESM, or anything. The only time we get the default resolution is if it's the main. So for example, if I was loading package and I had package.json, so you can also notice I didn't have a package.json there still. So I'll create the package.json now. I'll set the main to, let's make it the y.js. So app.js is loading package, which has got the main as the CommonJS y, and we're getting that loading. I can also, in line with legacy loading, skip the extension in this case if I wanted to, and it will work because we need to do that for legacy packages. At the same time, if I wanted to do it for the MJS version, I have to be explicit about the file extension. So when I load the MJS as the main, if I were to change that to a mx without the .mjs, we're not going to automatically do the extensions there. Again, these are fine-grained behaviors that aren't set in stone, but it's just what is currently implemented. It's a specific no-man entry point for package error, but that can also be changed or customized, whatever. So that's the main. The next, so this is kind of the JS and MJS behaviors without setting the default JS. I haven't done yet, but roughly in line with the way that these specs are interacting between the minimal repo and the file import specifier proposal. What I can then do is add encapsulation, which is provided by the export spec. And what encapsulation does is, well, if you set your main entry points using the special exports functionality instead of the main, what we're going to do is we're going to block any subpaths. So I can do the main for the package, fine, still. But if I try now and reach into that package and reach into y.js, for example, I'm going to get a new type of error, which is that we've sort of got a security model now for the package, where you say package exports, they don't define this y subpath. You can't import that. Now, at the moment, if I did explicitly dive into Node modules, I could still read that out. We could block that as well. So that's sort of indeterminate behavior. And these are the sort of edge cases that we need to iron out. But for now, it does the full encapsulation only when you're loading it as a package. The other feature that exports gives you is the ability to have an object, obviously, where we can then sort of define those subpaths. So I can say if I'm loading ./y.js, that must specifically load the y.js file. We can skip the extension on the subpath and have, say, a main. We've kind of settled on a .main, but that can be changed as well. So when you expand exports, we can still have the main as x.js. So with that, if I load package directly, it loads as a main. If I then load package /y, it loads that special map to y. If I try and load anything else, it's a security violation of the package boundary. So you're kind of getting that defined boundary. What we originally had for this export spec was that as soon as I put in exports, it would also immediately treat all JS files in that package as ES modules. And what I'm kind of arguing against at the moment is saying, well, we don't want to treat all the JS files necessarily because all I wanted to do was set the exports. I didn't say that I want to treat all my files as them. So it kind of feels like conflating the features to do them at the same time. Instead, what I'm proposing is we use mode to separate that into its own separate feature so that now if I do node app, I'm going to get a problem that, so if I just fix up that other one, it's now trying to load y.js as an ES module. So we're effectively using, so if I did that locally where I've got this app.mjs, I can now create a package. So this is the use case of like, I'm running a local app. I want to write a JS file as ESM. So I create a package JSON and I do mode ESM. I don't have to think about what my main is. I don't need to write exports and do all that. I'm just, my explicit intent, and this is the mode ESM proposal, is to say I want to load JS files in this package as ESM. And now I can move my app.mjs to an app.js. and still get the same behaviors of the app. I'll just fix up this one again here. So that's the mode ESM proposal. And then we're now out of CommonJS mode here. And then the final thing I wanted to just show, sorry, I know I'm going over time somewhat here. And I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope it just shows that these things are working, and it's just about refining the details if we want to go in these directions. In the package, if I wanted to have a dual mode package that's going to load one version in CommonJS and another version in ESM, we can use the main and the exports as the signifiers, and this is as has previously worked in the import file specifier proposal and the exports proposal. So use exports as the sort of main, which applies only in ESM. It does mean I get encapsulation. If I don't want encapsulation, I can opt out of it. There is an opt-out syntax, but you get it by default on the shorthand in the sugar. And then my main is set to the CommonJS main. So if I now have let me take this package out of mode ESM, and I'm going to have an app.mjs that does import package. And then on my app.js, which is my CommonJS version, I'm going to say require a package. So we're loading the same package, one from CommonJS, one from ESM. In the app.mjs, let me just fix up the typo there. Same problem. In the app.mjs, I'm getting the ES module version, hello ESM. And in the app.js version, I'm getting the CommonJS version. So it's the same package, the same specifier, and we're getting this sort of dual mode provided because you've got main and exports, which also specifically overrides the ESM behavior. So that's kind of all the specs we have and where we are at the moment. I'm advocating right now the mode ESM, but all the other behaviors, we've actually separated the implementations. We can get file specifier without everything else, and we've got exports just on its own, and we've got mode. So we're kind of just playing around with how to bundle it. And this is for the demo to be able to show everything running together. But these are the general directions we've been working on. So hopefully that helps to illustrate. If anyone's got any questions on that or wants me to clarify anything, I'm happy to go into it in more detail.
Okay, and one thing just before people start asking their questions, keep in mind that we went a little over and we have agenda items specifically for the import file specifier resolution proposal, for the dynamic modules proposal, for the add package exports resolver spec, and for the dynamic modules development. So if your questions have to do specifically with any of those, if we could save them.
We can make them through, yeah.
Jordan, your hand is up.
Yeah, not sure if what I'm about to ask was just in your list of things to defer, so stop me if it is. But it seems to me like exports is a super useful feature that we should like rapidly try and ship normally in Node for CJS, and then it just kind of falls into place for ESM as we build that.
Right.
So that sounds awesome. I mean, like there's a whole bunch of use cases for it. The only reason anyone uses rollup or a bundler on their published module is to get that security violation, essentially to prevent people from importing certain things. Like that sounds amazing. I'm super stoked about that part.
Yeah, it's all to spec.
So that's, I mean, that's like delightful. And I would really like to see that accelerated into regular Node.
A few things, I can respond directly to that, or did you want to make your second point?
Well, just the last piece was that I think you have a really good case for mode ESM's ergonomics. In other words, to, in concert with exports, be able to switch the, alter the default parsing of the whole package. But as I've said on the issue, I really don't like an enum of formats, considering that right now we have 2 module formats, but there's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 in the future. So I would prefer some alternative mechanism, but I like the way it couples with exports.
So
and
my primary,
I'm on board with the use case.
My primary concern there is something that's short to type. So I don't care what it is, as long as I can get that in 20 keystrokes or less. Whatever it is, I'm happy to put anything in its place. So, I'm more than open to discussing anything else that can do that. But like, as I say, the main thing is it's that use case of a lot of this is developer ergonomics. So it's about making it the experience that users aren't going to complain about. And as I've said in other discussions around this, it's giving users the solutions to the problem they're facing in a way that is exactly what they want and is easy to use. And that's the primary concern. And the more we deviate from that, the more we pick up user frustration, and the more that leads to kind of a general discontentment, as it were. So it's just focusing on those ergonomics is the important thing. And
we can bike shed the
exactly
the
name
thing on the
whatever
thread.
it is. Exactly.
Yeah, that's fine.
In terms of the exports, if we want to bring it to CommonJS, there's a complexity there because, say, for example, I define some exports for a package. At the moment, I could do the dual mode case because exports applied specifically in the ESM case, but it didn't apply in the CommonJS case. So that provided a nice sort of way to switch between the two modes, or between the two loaders, and have different behaviors between the loaders. Now, if we want exports to go to CommonJS as well, then we need to provide the functionality in exports to be able to provide different exported values between CommonJS and ESM. So maybe we need to have an object where you say, here are the CommonJS mappings, here are the ESM mappings, and split those. So it adds a little bit more complexity to the spec if we do that, while trying to maintain the dual mode sort of functionality. And I am hesitant to pick up that because of the fact that it adds complexity to a spec that otherwise is really nice and simple and something that we can get out soon. But if we determine that that is a crucial functionality, we can certainly extend the spec to cater to that case where you have the sort of CJS ESM variations between the two. Something like where you would write, say, exports, and you would say, in CommonJS, I'm going to load, $./x, and then you branch into ESM as well, and something like that, where you have a split between the two.
So that's something else I'd love to bike shed. I think I share your concerns and goals, but I do think it's perhaps much more important to me that this be a feature that's available in CJS first. But like all of the things you talked about for ESM,
let's open a spec discussion around the splitting the mappings.
Okay.
That'd be great.
I think we should move on, if you don't mind, and we can expand on more on this if we have time in the agenda for the exports. Jeremiah, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I think this is excellent. Great job to everyone that's worked on this to get this to this point. I do have a question about encapsulation. Just to clarify, why is that the default in ESM mode?
So I can also clarify the behavior without the mode ESM spec, which I'm presenting now, is that what you just described, that as soon as you bring in exports, you get JS as ESM. So the idea is that exports is an encapsulation of what you get when you import from the package, and it can encapsulate everything else. It's possible to open up the exports again with the following mapping. So it does actually support folder mappings. If you do say // like loaders or something, you could have a folder ending with a trailing slash, which maps to another folder. And similarly, you can do the base level map, which if you have that as your exports, it opens it up again, and you can now get any type of, you can import anything again from the package without needing an explicit map for it. So there is an opt-out of the full encapsulation. But yeah, without the mode ESM spec, as soon as you add exports, because you want JS files as ESM, then you get encapsulation, which I felt was a conflation. And that's why I think we need the separate mode ESM spec to say, this is an ESM package where JS files are ESM. But I don't necessarily want to encapsulate it and stop people from just picking out any module in here that they feel like using.
So I think so, almost. Is encapsulation then just part of loading ES modules in general, or is that like a separate?
Just exports. The encapsulation is just for the exports feature. Okay. As soon as you put exports in your package JSON.
Got it. Got
it. Gus had added in the notes. I gotta go. My main concern here is that mode ESM leaves out everything that isn't module source text with a JS extension, which leaves out a lot of code. We need something that gives people more freedom.
Yeah, so I hope, I don't know how the loader team has been doing. I know Bradley couldn't make it today, but loaders are our thing.
Can I actually propose, like what I was going to suggest might actually hit that like directly. You're using mode ESM, and we're just thinking of mode as a flag that like toggles one mode or another. From a universal perspective, if you have a package .mode, you could actually be providing a mode for resolution, which can go beyond the idea of just ESM or whatever. You could say browsers. You could say so you could have those different resolution concepts, which may or may not be tied to loaders. Mode ESM is basically a flag that tells Node to use Node's ESM mode. But if a package is loaded, let's say in a browser, and they read that metadata, mode ESM could signify particular treatment for how to resolve URLs. So if the mode field is more of a it's really a queue on how to begin resolving, and to open it up as this idea of a like kind of like MIME. But it just says that the resolution queue for this particular scope would be whatever that word is. So I don't know. Does that clarify? Does that make sense? Or
yeah, so it could be extended into something that sort of enables different package features, and yeah, I mean, maybe, we were even discussing if it could be like, maybe in future it'll be like a version number of which version of node resolution are you using or something. I mean, there's lots of awful things it could turn into as well. So I don't know, but it's definitely worth discussing further.
Rob has their hand up.
Hi. Yeah, I think the exports feature seems really, really great. So it gets us ESM mode and it gets us encapsulation, and it seems to be so great that this is kind of like in general the desired way of using it. So I guess I'm wondering, do we really need another way to get unencapsulated usage, considering that that Guy has already shown that the exports keyword can be used to achieve unencapsulated usage as well.
5 minutes. This is due to a train.
Yeah, so I think if so the point is, if you have if we take away mode ESM and just use exports as the signifier. So if I've got my local application, and I do have another build that does this. It's the IRP implementation branch, actually the one that was linked in the notes. So this is what you get by default when you run that. If when I wanted to run app.js as ESM, instead I would just put exports in my package.json here, and I'd get that as ESM. I'd get all my JS files in the package as ESM. But the argument I'm trying to make, and if you read through the repo, there's a bunch of ergonomic arguments around it, which is like, I think the core one comes down to the fact that if you're a user wanting to solve a problem, you want the cognitive overhead of solving the problem of treating JS files as ESM. And you don't want to now be dealing with encapsulation and all these other ideas. So it's kind of like we're shoving a whole bunch of features together. And I mean, maybe that is fine, but I just feel like there will always be a subset of people who won't want the encapsulation. And because of that, we can't assume that everyone who wants JS as ESM must also now get encapsulation by default. So it just feels like, yeah, bundling those two groups together, and that feels like a recipe for frustration, because it just takes someone who doesn't like encapsulation, one person who doesn't like encapsulation, to voice their opinion, and you've got that frustration there. And there's also an argument for like primitives that are as simple as possible and solving the direct need. But yeah, I mean, there are some, like, there was some duplication between the main and exports there. We could disable the main for ESM entirely. There are various edge cases here that can be discussed and worked through. But the main point I was making about mode ESM was it exactly throws away this conflation that Jeremiah also mentioned as well. Is why is this coming? Is this just coming for all ESM packages? Well, if you want ESM as JS, it will, unless we have mode ESM.
Yes, so I'm just I'd like to hear from others about whether that really that an argument to say that this is a worthwhile feature.
Right. So maybe everyone is fine with that, and yeah, sure.
Jeffrey, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to try to
move forward in the agenda.
I just wanted to try to briefly address that. Just to mention that this idea of adding a mode flag in addition is like something that we added like kind of very last minute, like we just started discussing a few days ago. If you look at the two proposals, don't really mention that. They like the exports proposal and then the import specifier that was built on top of it, both assume just the one flag of exports, and that yeah, it kind of does everything. And if within exports, you can specify the main. Within exports, you can open up your entire package, CommonJS style if you want to. It was just kind of, we were thinking that like, yeah, like Guy said, is it make more sense for, yeah, like what he's showing here. That's the open up everything version of it. And now he's adding the main. So it's more just a UX concern of like, is this confusing for users? Should we, split these out? And, I think we're not sure. And I think that I'd love to get this like into people's hands to start testing it. And then we can start kind of just seeing what people struggle with or have difficulty with. But yeah, we have one branch for each way of doing it. And I think I'd love to start pushing it forward and getting more feedback.
Yeah, so they're kind of two builds: IRP implementation and IRP mode implementation. And Miles, I value your suggestion. If there's a way of maybe making these binaries available, so that people who've seen the demo today can try it out easily. Would there be a way to do that? Or
yeah, just send me a link to the branch, and I can get a test build done on our infrastructure, and I can get you the one-liner to be able to install that with NVM.
Amazing. So, I mean, we can do the two branches if people want to compare the two approaches. So we've got the one where you just have exports and the one where you have mode and exports. And then maybe you can see the difference between how it does JS as ESM. Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, I think we've kind of gone into a whole bunch of this different stuff. We have 20 minutes left in the meeting, and we have 3 items on the agenda right now. One is the specify import file specifier resolution proposal. I believe that's Jeffrey's proposal. We have the add package exports proposal to resolve spec. That's the one we've actually been talking quite a bit about right now. And the dynamic modules development in Node.js. I think we might want to start with the dynamic modules, and then maybe if we have time, jump back into talking about kind of both of those other proposals, because they're kind of interconnected with what we just did. Does anyone have any objections to that? Okay, great. Guy, do you want to kick off the discussion here about the dynamic modules development in Node.js?
I think at this point, the way the discussions have gone is that we're currently dealing with trying to work out other alternatives to the export star functionality. So it would be better if Jay Dalton, who's not here, or Kevin can present their ideas around that, because it's really out of my hands at this point.
Okay. Kevin, did you have anything to add to this for right now, or should we just punt it until the next meeting?
Probably punt it until the next meeting. Guy, has there been any changes to your proposal repo? I haven't been watching that repo.
Okay. Yeah. No, there haven't been any changes. If we punt this to the next meeting, I don't know what's going to happen at TC39. But you know, last we discussed this, we said, well, it shouldn't push back the TC39 meeting. I am not actively working on dynamic modules at this point because I'm still waiting for feedback on the on the concerns around export star, and so there's nothing I can do at all at this point. So
Gotcha.
I'm not actively doing any driving of the proposal. Yeah. So if we need some kind of feedback from the other side to move forward. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll be in touch with you later this week. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to, you know, come to some kind of consensus on it one way or the other. So no need to worry.
Sure.
The last question that I have on that for both Guy and Kevin, we have you know, the next TC39 meeting is coming up. It actually is the same, like this next meeting will be running during TC39, so we won't have an opportunity to all collaborate again before then, unless it's off thread. Is there anything that we need to know before we go to TC39, or is kind of the thing we bring to TC39, you know, we talked about it after the last discussion, blocking export star didn't seem palpable to all parties and we're working on it still? Is that kind of the message to bring?
So the original plan was to have consensus on not supporting export star and then allowing that to get spec approval in TC39 to allow implementation work to go forward so that we could get a, you know, possibly something floated in Node in the next 4 months. At the moment, if we don't have consensus, we can't go to TC39 seeking approval. So there won't be any movement on that.
Okay. I'll take it offline to make sure we're on the same page. Safe to say we can move on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, I mean, the only alternative is if anyone cares very strongly, we could do a vote for consensus. But I'm not going to call that.
I don't think that we should right now because we know that Jade Dalton is not happy with this. And while we do have quorum and we could do that right now, it doesn't really seem in the spirit of how we're trying to do things. But I can try to follow up. Maybe Kevin and Guy, do you have time to do a meeting next week before TC39 with like maybe get Jade Dalton in too and see if we can all sync?
Yes, of course.
A meeting's not going to help anything. We needed spec work to address the problem. And without spec work, nothing's going to move forward. But yes, as I say, it's a difficult topic for me because it's just like the wind was just shot out of my sails on this one.
Yeah. So let's take this offline, Guy. How about you and I talk, and I'll see if I can get resources or people to look into the spec stuff, and we'll take it from there.
Sure.
Okay. The next one on here, we've got, and I don't know if anyone can take over on the notes because I think Gus was doing the notes before and we maybe lost them. We've got the specify import file specifier resolution proposal. Jeff, this is your proposal. Did you want to talk about this today?
I don't know if there's anything that needs to well, I guess the one thing I would say is, as you saw with Guy's demo, we're, you know, closing in on, you know, we've already implementing it. So it's sort of like any more notes on this proposal or the, you know, any of the 3 proposals that our little group has been working on, now would be the time so we can start trying to get into the wrapping up portion of phase 2.
Okay, excellent. So other than that, nothing more to update?
if there's anything that anyone finds so objectionable that they would be like, no, I would, refuse that this implementation be, merged into our new kernel or something like that, then, let's hear you sooner than later if you don't mind. I guess that would be it.
Okay. So call to action, like anyone on the call and, other people online who may have opinions, the link to this is issue number 19 on the ECMAScript modules repo. And there's also like a whole separate repo for the proposal. Please review it and add notes. Jeff, I guess one question would be, there was that slight change of behavior that was introduced in Guy's implementation that's no longer looking at exports as being one of the mechanisms for identifying ESM. But I think that what the mechanisms were that we were looking at were not hard coded into your proposal. Is that accurate?
Yeah, if the proposal was written kind of carefully to say like, it will look in package.json to find some ESM signifying field, whatever that may be. And then in the examples, it talked about exports, but when it was introduced, it was like, this is outside the scope of the proposal. Whatever it turns out to be is the thing.
If we have mode ESM, do we still need that? Or is mode ESM the thing that it looks for in the package JSON?
We mentioned the mode field in the proposal as like one of the fields it could look for.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't know if we need like a meta proposal to describe how these all work together, but like it's kind of like whatever we decide on. If mode is going to be the one thing that turns it on and off, especially if export then applies to CGS, so then it shouldn't be considered a ESM signifier. These are all easy changes to make whenever we figure out the final version of the UX for package.json.
So I think it might be a good idea then to open an issue on the modules repo, specifically to discuss like what can those mechanisms in the package JSON be, because it sounds like that may actually be like a supplementary proposal. And if we break that out, that may also make it really clear that like, hey, the algorithm is just more about like determining it, but like that extension to the algorithm could be its own bike shed.
I think that's Guy's proposal where he was talking about adding the mode field. We could kind of hash that out in his proposal there of like, what exactly is the UX of package.json going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
So the mode specification is only like 8 lines because of the way it fits into the existing proposal is so simple. So it's actually just 2 lines, and then the rest of it is dealing with the main entry point. So if we want to look at other options, we can open an issue to maybe explore some options. But that spec is an instance of what the package JSON feature could be. Another thing, just to mention it briefly, that we also need to still address is what we want to do about the top level. If we want to have a special flag that's going to change the top level and also apply it to evaluation, and we probably need to either incorporate that into one of the existing specs or add a new spec for that.
Oh, do you mind if I add to that, Miles?
Yep.
That was like kind of the obvious thing that came out of your feedback, Miles, when you looked at the proposal. Was like it was only discussing like how to handle an import statement, like the specifier and an import statement, like import file.js. How should file.js be treated? And that was like intended to be the scope of that proposal. And it was kind of like, well, if we're actually going to implement this, we need to get into ESM mode somehow from outside, like node space main.js or whatever. So we at least need to define that one. So then we added that to the spec, but it does raise the obvious question of like, okay, so what about all the other ways that you can, get into launching code, like --eval or standard in and so on and so forth. So that feels to me like the obvious next proposal that we need to write and hash out, like, okay, how are we going to handle all these other cases? I think that could be a standalone proposal unless people feel otherwise. I don't know if it should be part of stage 2 or what. I don't know if it is part of loaders or tied up into any of that, but please tell me what you guys think.
Bueller?
I mean,
Yeah, don't all jump in at once.
this is probably getting into the like discussion of what the field should be and so on, but I continue to think that the simplest thing is a straight up map of extensions to default parse mode for an extension. So if you want JS files to parse as if they were MJS files, your map would have JS as the key and MJS as the value. And that would continue to fit in well with require.extensions and also with, future module formats as we decide what the default extension is for that parsing mode. I feel like that even fits under your 20 character requirement guy to essentially enable mode ESM for your package. And yeah, they're like Jeremiah's asking in chat, there might be issues to work through there. I certainly haven't written up a proposal or anything, but I feel like whatever solution we come up with also needs to not privilege ESM at as the one module format, because there is going to be other ones.
Great. Jeremiah, did you have something to add to that?
Not much. I mean, I think it would be simplest to have people type what they know the mode as rather than what we might call the extension, but I guess we can debate that somewhere else.
Bradley, your hand up, and then I have something to add afterwards.
Sure. So we need to be careful when we talk about circularity. Almost everything where we're metaprogramming how the loaders work is going to have the ability to claim it has circularity problems. So the canonical example is going to be, if I add a loader from loader.js, and that loader is loaded as common.js by default, because we haven't changed any flags, and that loader makes all .js files treated as ES modules, not as common.js, we can make the claim that it has a circularity problem. That's not really true. If you look at how other environments do things around this, how service workers work and things like that, your metaprogramming and instrumentation are treated as a separate, isolated environment. And they use the runtime guaranteed primordial forms of what they use. So I don't want us to bring up circularity problems unless it's a circularity problem after we treat these metaprogramming situations as isolated and separate. Because if we treat any circularity problem as fatal, all ability to instrument how loading works is fatal, because they all suffer from circularity. That's it.
Thanks, Brad. I think the bit that I was curious about this, so like we have the mappings that you were talking about, Jordan, as a possibility. And I guess you could have like ESM as like one potential goal, or like CJS or WASM, and you could have a mapping of extensions to goals or MIMEs, but we may want to for those MIMEs. And that was the proposal that Jeffrey was talking about. That would be like per package based on the package JSON.
Yeah, so my thought was whether it's extensions, MIMEs, or an enum of mode names, which that one doesn't sound very scalable to me. But regardless of what it is, it would be in a package JSON, and also you'd be able to pass those values by command line flags, which would answer the, command line questions.
Yeah. So
yeah.
In theory, though, like just kind of thinking about this as a progressive proposal, if mode to start with supports strings but doesn't support objects, and those strings are like the same things that would be on the right side of that equation, like could we not extend the proposal later to support objects?
Yes, but if the default is ESM, then that privileges ESM, which is what I don't think we should do.
I think that the default, without, like, if you don't include the mode line, then like the default is to assume common.
Yeah. Oh, right. No, I agree with that. But I'm saying that if we, so you're saying a mode a mode string that could be later expanded to be in mode mapping. And then it's just a question of what the value of the string is, and it could be an extension, a MIME, or an enum. Yeah, and that, I think that's reasonable. I think that's something we can discuss on GitHub somewhere.
Okay, and Guy, does that align with your thoughts on it at all?
Yeah, you sort of think of the string value as being a sort of the MIME-DB name is one interpretation, and then we could add new ones where you say, well, in this mode you've got WASM and Node files that will load automatically. Or another nice thing is we're no longer in the ESM mode. So in the legacy mode. Actually, no. The way it's specified at the moment in the legacy mode in our minimal implementation with the file import specifier resolution, we won't load JSON node or anything like that, even in the legacy mode. Only the common JS loader will. So we're just loading JS still. So that means that in both modes we can add new file extensions without that being a breaking change. So, we could change the default mode in future, potentially, and there might be ways to do that, where you can say WASM will just load by default and that kind of thing. That path around how the default should change and stuff, that is itself a very interesting problem. And, I was hoping, if we could get some idea of if this is something that we are gonna dig into further, if it could be worth getting back on the call with the NPM folks about this one as well, because there's some usability around that too.
Yeah, I have a call with someone from NPM this afternoon. I can bring it up. We have 1 minute left. We still have quorum. Really quick one to try to pass through before we close for the day. We have the package exports proposal. We didn't actually really get into that. But a quick thing on that proposal, it seemed like we had interest in bringing that proposal just to Node Core as something that could work in CJS. Do we have any objections to that being brought outside of the modules working group and just being brought to Node Core?
We should first create a tracking issue, I think, to track how the spec has to adapt to that, because as mentioned, it requires new functionality in the spec that doesn't exist right now. But I don't have any objections personally, sorry. But just to mention that clarification on the spec.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think we would have to describe how that would function, what the UX would be. We were talking about this earlier. What would the UX be if you had a dual mode version of exports? Because that would be the concern I think that people would bring up, would be like, is this too complicated now?
Okay, I'm about to get kicked out of my meeting room, so I've got to end this. Let's make an action item that we want to figure out some of those edge cases before we bring it to the project, but it seems that no one objects to this being beyond just the module goal. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for an excellent meeting and have a great rest of the week.